And he was a journalist, and he worked in Paris for his newspaper in Vienna. So he organized and simply said, we need to go back to the land of Palestine and take our land back. So he wrote a book called Der Judenstaat, which in English is The Jewish State. He wrote that about 1890. And he laid out a plan there that to have Jews to move back to Israel. And at that time, there was very little interest for that. And we had some Russian Jews, and this brings in the Khazars, but that's a different story, so I'm not talking about that now. So basically, Polish Jews and Russian Jews, they were poor. They were the one that started going back to Israel in 1890 and on, but it was a small group of people going down.
Which would have been Palestine.
Yes. And that was, at that time, governed by the Ottoman Empire.
Okay.
So in the Judenstaat, he wrote this: if we have to sacrifice whole branches of Jews, so be it, as long as we can establish a new Israel in Palestine. The American Jews did not really, they didn't like it. They didn't like Zionism. The British Jews didn't like it either. And but other Jews from different parts of the world, including Eastern European countries. So he had a first conference in 1897 in Basel, Switzerland. And that was the first Jewish World Congress. At that conference, they adopted what they called the Protocol of the Elders of Zion. They have been vilified and said they were a forgery, they never existed, and so on. The Protocol of the Elders of Zion was 24 parts, and they were translated into Russian, and from Russian were translated into English. And in 1905, a copy of the protocols exists in the British Museum in London. And I had an evangelist back in the 70s to go to London and check it out. And sure enough, the protocols are there, and you can look at them, but you can't take them out.
I'll bet.
So now we have the protocols. Looking back, as I have read the 24 points, everything that Herzl set out to do in 1897 has happened. It had taken place exactly the way he wrote it. Every point has been fulfilled. So I tell people this: either he was very lucky of writing a document 100 years ago that just happened to develop just like he did, or somebody followed it and made it happen. So now we come to World War I, and World War I, the Zionists now, and we have the Zionists, we got a world government. These are two different groups. But the world government decided that in order for Palestine, they had to get it away from the Ottomans. And that's the reason that Turkey was lured into World War I. And of course, Germany lost, and so Turkey lost. And then from 1921 and 22, England and France carved up the Ottoman Empire, and all the different nations from Egypt, Jordan, Palestine, Syria, and Lebanon, Iraq, Iran, and so on. They were created by these two French and British ambassadors have been working on that, and then they were ratified by the British and French government. The U.S. government never ratified it. Matter of fact, Wilson had to pull out of Europe because the people here said, get out of Europe, you don't want to be involved. You won't want to be involved. So now we had, after World War I now the Zionists begin to work really hard. They created a group called BETAR, spelled B-E-T-A-R, and they had another guy by the name of Jabotinsky, and we had Golda Meir and a number of others. All of them were actually Khazar Jews. They were all from Eastern Europe. And they're the ones that started the process of getting into the state of Israel.
Did you say Khazarian?
Yeah, the kingdom was called the Khazarian kingdom. The people there are called Khazars. And it existed between about 720 to 1150. And these people in Khazaria they were not Russians, they were Turkmen. Same race as a group of people that are in Turkey. And the emperor, about 720, he wanted to have a monotheistic religion, so he invited Muslims to come up and tell about their religion. And then he had Christians coming up, and then he had Jews come up. And then he made a decision that the Muslims and Christians came out of Judaism, so he was going to go with a root. So they became Jews. They moved in. He had a lot of rabbis come in. They built synagogues. And for the next 400 years, the Khazars became more Jewish than the Jews in the other part of the world. And, of course, they were converted to Judaism about 700, and the first covenant did not exist. So they are false Jews. But they are the majority of the people that were part of the establishing Israel. So going back to the transfer agreement now. So it's a big fight. When Hitler began to take power in 1936, we had American Jews and British Jews. They organized a boycott. And this was a very strong boycott, and it was led by Stephen Weiss. And he was a well-known rabbi here in the United States. And it really picked up steam. So just like we have sanctioned Russia, Putin today, Germany was sanctioned. And it was really biting. The Zionist leadership in Germany sided with the Nazis. And so there was a war for about 8 or 9 years between the Zionists in Germany and the Jews in America and in England. And finally, the German Jews convinced the American British and said, if we can have the transfer agreement, we can transfer Jews from Germany down to Palestine, and by doing that, we can then build a nation, because they wanted skilled people. They wanted engineers, teachers, bankers, people that were educated. And what I got from Poland and Russia was labor. British Jews said, we're not going to go to Palestine. American Jews said, we're not going to go to Palestine. And the German Jews said, no, we're not going.
Right.
And so that's why the Zionist says, okay, because Fyodor wrote this in his book. He said, now, if you have an old prisoner in a prison and you open the door, he's so used to the prison he will not come out. So you got to kick him out. And that's exactly what he did.